Yes, I hope you can all see my screen now. I would also like to welcome you to this webinar of LCA of meat. My name is Margrethe Terkelsen, and I'm an associate professor at Department of Food Science at Aarhus University. And I'm also the coordinator of this Nordic network, which is funded by the NKJ, Nordic Agricultural Research Organization. And our overall title of the network is Sustainable Meat Production in the Nordic region, and our acronym is NordMeat. And we have participants from all five countries, Iceland, Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, and also different stakeholders in each country listed here in the figure. It's a two-year network. We started here in March in 2024 and will end by the end of February 26. The aim of the NordMeat network is to establish a viable Nordic network of researchers and stakeholders within meat production and research, supporting exchange of ideas, knowledge, and joint applications for the sustainable meat production and consumption in the Nordic countries. And when we made the application, we identified two themes that we thought could really benefit from some collaboration. And one of them is what we're discussing today, the LCA of meat. So that has been our theme here in 24. We have had a workshop where we tried to identify the knowledge available, but also knowledge gaps. And that's what we're trying to present today. Next year, we will have more focus on the utilization of the whole animal, trying to explore how can we increase the value of each carcass, again through a workshop with the partners of the network, and then followed by a webinar where we try to disseminate some of our identified knowledge and also knowledge gaps. And finally, we will end up with a PhD course in February, is it planned February 2026, hopefully disseminating some of the outcome of our network here. So today's program is LCA of meat, and we have invited several speakers here, which are each of our experts in their field of LCA. So first of all, Lisbeth Mogensen from Aarhus University in Denmark, she will give us an introduction to what is LCA of meat, what are the components that contribute to the LCA. Then we'll have a presentation from Selma Al-Sohari from Danish Crown in Denmark, because they are also working at Danish Crown with LCA, and she will guide us through attributional and consequential LCA and the allocation. Then we, at our workshop, we discussed very much this about the contribution from soil carbon and its inclusion to LCA, and that's why we thought it would be really nice to have an input on that theme, and that will be Anina Lehtila from Luke in Finland, who will give that presentation. And that will be followed by a taped presentation from Annie Havemoen, who will look into other impact factors, but the carbon footprint. And finally, we have a presentation from Oliver Julier from Technical University of Denmark, who will guide us through the trajectories towards sustainable and healthy food systems. And by that, we should be around 3:30, where we'll have some time for a debate or some inputs from you as the audience. After each presentation, there is approximately 5 minutes, and you're welcome to ask questions. We encourage you to write them in the chat, and then I will read them loud and have the speakers to answer them. And then following the presentations, we will have this debate, and here we suggest that you just raise your hand, and then we will give you the microphone to ask a question, or if possible, you have any inputs to this whole theme of LCA of meat. And as Lisa told you, we have a homepage that you can see here, and by the end of the seminar or the webinar, we will put this taped presentation on the homepage for you to look at it again or share it with some colleagues. So I think that's the sort of the details of our format here of the webinar, and then I will give the word back to Lisa.
Thank you, Margrethe. I will give the floor immediately to Lisbeth. So please share your presentation, Lisbeth Mogensen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see the screen?
Yes, you can.
Also in presentation mode?
No, it's
Oh my God. But yeah.
We also see your notes actually, so
yeah. Hopefully now.
Yes, now it's better.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Lisbeth Mogensen, and my background is agronomy and a PhD in organic milk production. And now I work with climate and environmental assessments of both agriculture and food system, and also relation to sustainable diets by using life cycle assessments. And this presentation is made by the work made by our LCA team in the system group at Department of Agroecology. And I also included Theodora and Selma that you will meet later, because they both make their PhD by us on LCA of pork production. So what I will talk about is about LCA of food, LCA of pork and beef, and a little bit about methodology. So here we have the carbon footprint per kilo foods, and you can see animal-based food and also meat has very high environmental impact per kilo foods, with beef and lamb at the highest level and followed by pork and poultry. And that is still the case if we express the climate impact with another functional unit. Here it's per 100 grams of protein, then animal-based food, including meat, still has the highest impacts. LCA can be used to calculate the environmental impacts of our food products. The idea is to look at the whole system at the same time and in a life cycle perspective. That means that we include the whole chain from cradle to grave, not only what happened on the farm, but also production of input like feed, fertilizer, energy, and so on. And at the same time, it is a holistic method because we include several impact categories at the same time, typically climate impact, eutrophication, land use, effect on biodiversity. And the aim is to be able to reduce the climate and environmental impact of a system without creating new environmental problems elsewhere in the system. Thereby, we can use the result from a LCA to reduce the impact from the food system, both looking at what can be done at the farm, at agriculture production, and at diet level. And this figure illustrates the potential reduction potential in climate impacts of the food system. Okay, if we look at LCA of pork, to calculate environmental impact of pork, we need to look at all steps in the process from the production of feed to what happened in the herd and at the slaughterhouse, and also how manure is handled. In her PhD, Theodora was comparing Danish pork production in 2005 and 2016. And here you can see the contribution from different steps in the chain and for different impact categories. And if you look to the left, we have the different contribution to climate impact of pork. You can see that feeds, manure management, and the enteric fermentation are the hotspots. You can also see that production of feed is responsible for more than 60% of the climate impact per kilo of meat produced. And from 2005 to 2060, there was a reduction in the average Danish carbon footprint per kilo pork, both because of a reduction, you can see the green that it's mainly due to a reduction in carbon footprint of feed, and that was a combination of a reduced amount of feed used and also a reduced carbon footprint per kilo feed. And this reduction was again caused by several factors, especially from at farm level, reduced feed use per kilo live weight gain, and also a change in housing and manure handling strategies. In feed production, this reduction in carbon footprint per kilo food was caused by reduced N application rate mainly, and at slaughterhouse level, there was an increased utilization of pig for human consumption from 79% in 2005 up to 83.8% in 2016. So feed is the major hotspot, and carbon footprint of feed is a combination of the amount of feed and the carbon footprint per kilo of feed. It's therefore very important with data of high quality for the amount of feed use. And with regard to the LCA data for environmental impacts, for homegrown feed, it can be discussed whether we should use the farmer's own data that can take into account the efficiency in his own production, or it should be data from a general database. For important feed, it's important that the same LCA data are used across different countries. And it's also important to agree on whether to include contribution from land use change or not. Manure is a hotspot also, but is it a product or waste? Who bears the burden? The pig farmer, should he get credit for the fertilizer value of the manure? The crop farmer must take the burden from manure application, and the credit for energy production from biogas goes to the energy sector. So in a Danish context, it's suggested that manure can be considered as a residual if it has an economic value, if it doesn't have an economic value, or as a co-product if it has an economic value, but not as a waste. Okay, if we look at LCA of beef, some important factors is which production system the beef come from. Is it from the dairy system or from the beef breed system? Do we use attributional LCA or consequential LCA? And this again, with land use changes, is it included or how is it included? And allocation, Selva will come back to talk about that topic. Here you can see that beef meat from the beef breed has a carbon footprint that is 3 times higher than beef from the dairy farm. And this is an example of 2 methods for calculation. LCA of beef. To the left, you have attributional LCA, where the functional units is the actual mix of dairy and beef breed products. And to the right, you have consequential LCA, where the functional unit is marginal beef. Here it's calculated as imported beef breed. So it has a huge impact for the carbon footprint of beef. And here we look at how it looks if we included the contribution from land use changes and the 3 different methods. If it's direct land use change, that means for a crop cultivated in area with deforestation. If it's indirect land use change, then all crops had a carbon footprint from land use change based on the assumption that cultivation 1 hectare will lead to deforestation somewhere in the world. And also with carbon opportunity cost, also all food products has a land use change from the cultivation of 1 hectare because it could have been with forest instead, and then the food production should take the burden from that. And here you see 3 examples. To the left, that's used the indirect land use change, where there was the blue is the contribution from farm scale, and then there's at 0.7 from indirect land use change. In the example in the middle, it's direct land use change that is added 0.06 from direct land use change. That means a very low amount of soya has been used. And then to the right, you have with carbon opportunity cost, and there's added an additional 21 kilo CO2 due to this carbon opportunity cost if there had been forest instead in the land with feed production. And similar with beef, with indirect land use change, we add 10 kilo CO2 extra. With the direct land use change, it's very low, 0.1. And if it's carbon footprint of beef with carbon opportunity cost, then there's added extra 201 kilo CO2. So it had a huge effect with this choice of methods. And a little bit about methodology in the end. It's not only with regard to climate that there's big pressure on the earth, it's also with regard to biodiversity loss and eutrophication caused by nitrogen and phosphor flows. And this is an example of including more impact category than just climate. This is where LCA is calculated for organic and conventional milk. And if we look at the top, only at the climate effects, there's no difference between organic and conventional milk. But if we also include other impact categories, for example, biodiversity loss and ecotoxicity, then there's a big difference between organic and conventional milk in favor of the organic milk. And this example is about ranking different food products according to ecotoxicity. And you saw before, if we rank according to climate, then beef is in the top, followed by pork and chicken. But if we rank according to ecotoxicity, instead, beef are lower than both pork and poultry. Okay, thank you very much. That was all what I have included.
Thank you, Lisbeth. Now we have 5 minutes for short questions.
Should I stop sharing or?
Yes, I think you can do that, Lisbeth.
Yes.
Yeah. So are there any clarifying questions for Lisbeth? Yes, Olivier.
Yes, very nice presentation. And now, what is your recommendation for harmonizing the comparison? I mean, between the different land use change and the COC, and how do we get consistent data set in a sense when we compare? That's a bit my question.
The first step is at least to use the same methods. Yes, but you also mean whether we should include it or not?
No, I was meaning, okay, what would be your recommendation, in fact,
you know that
for which method to use in your case?
Yeah, you know the PEF method to try to harmonize in Europe. They recommend that if you include land use change, then it should be the direct land use change only where deforestation take actually place.
Thank you.
We have a question here from Clara Maria. She asked, within the feed ingredients, is there a specific ingredient that has a major environmental burden?
There has been in some of the GFLE database, I think especially this oil product from palm industry has very high impacts. And it's again a little bit about the methods, whether it's attributional or whether the consequential or attributionally. But else, in general, you can say that whether the concentrated feed has higher impact than roughage grown on the farm.
Yes. Rune, please.
Yes, very interesting. And I think that the land use is important, although Norway is quite different, at least compared to Brazil. But in Norway, we have the opposite situation, that if we don't have the animals grazing, the forest will grow. So how is it, or should there be different models for different types of land area? So, for instance, in Norway, we need the omnivores. No, I mean to grass and to keep the landscape open. So compared with deforestation of rainforest, for instance, in Brazil, so that they contribute to keeping the nature and the culture that we have here.
Yeah, both the way, as I understand the past 2050, and also the way we interpret indirect land use change, then because these areas are not in rotation, that they are kept out of that, because it's you can say, because there's no alternative use for that. It doesn't compete with growing barley for direct consumption or wheat for direct consumption. So yeah, for sure you should keep in two pools, the permanent grassland and land in rotation. So where you more or less get the other for free, you can say.
Yes, I agree, but as I understand, that's not the general perception in the other countries. So that there is or should be a different way of counting in different countries.
I don't think they include whether the permanent pastures in any of the calculations.
No, but that has a positive value for the society, and also for the, although when the trees grow, they keep, of course, the carbon inside of the logs, but instead of converting it to feed or through the meat consumption or the milk that is produced by the cows. So yeah, but it's just a reflection or a comment from my side.
Yeah, but for sure it should be kept separate, and then when it comes to effect on biodiversity, then you will get very much credit for big area with grazing animals.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. This was a very nice warm-up for the debate section after the presentations. Our next speaker is Selma Al-Zuhairi. So Selma, please share your presentation and the floor is yours.
I hope you hear me clearly now. I'll just try to share my presentation. Give me a second.
We hear you fine.
Good.
Yeah, it's good.
Is it okay? Good.
Yes, it's good.
Yes. So hello, everyone. My name is Selma Al-Zuhairi, and today I have a presentation for you on attributional life cycle assessment and consequential life cycle assessment, and a little bit about allocation, because it is a key element in these modeling approaches. The case study that I will present today is, of course, in regards to meat, and in this case, a cattle case study, just to show that depending on which kind of modeling approach that you choose, you could have significant different or get to significant different results. In some cases, choosing either ALCA or CLCA will have smaller impact on the results. But as mentioned, my name is Selma Al-Zuhairi. I work as a sustainability specialist in Danish Crown. Previously, as Lisbeth also said, I did a PhD together with Aarhus University in Lisbeth's team. Together also, it was an industrial PhD, so it was with Danish Crown as well. It was on LCA on pork. Let me see if I can switch this. Okay, it doesn't seem like it's working. Do you still see the same slide?
Yes, it's the front one so far.
Okay, let's see. I hope it's switched now. Now it works. But yes, so this is just shortly to present the differences or like more theoretical differences between attributional and consequential life cycle assessment, because one of the first questions the LCA practitioner will ask themselves is, what type of LCA methodology or modeling approach do I have to choose? Because the modeling approach will be highly linked to the purpose of your LCA study. Because each of these modeling approaches will, of course, respond to a different question. You can say the attributional life cycle assessment, if the circle you see on the screen will kind of represent the global environmental burden. So doing an attributional life cycle assessment, you will typically look at what part of then the global environmental burdens should be assigned to the product that you are doing an LCA on, or your product. Whereas the consequential life cycle assessment, the question you will get in the answer to is, what is actually the impact of the product on the global environmental burdens? So you could have some net positive impacts, but also some emissions associated to that product in question. You can say typically attributional life cycle assessment, as it says in the words, will attribute the environmental impact to a product. It's more retrospective view, so it's already a product that has been produced, whereas consequential life cycle assessment seeks to look into the future of the next product in line. And I always go back to the can of tomatoes example that I was given when I was a student at the university taking LCA courses. So doing an attributional life cycle assessment on a product, in this case a canned tomato, it will basically be the environmental impact of that can of tomatoes that you have in your hand when you pull it out or down from the shelf in the supermarket. So that is the product that has already been produced, where you also know your uncertainties. However, for the consequential life cycle assessment, it will be the product next in line. So it will be the product replacing that product that you just purchased. So it's the product that has not yet been produced. Here you look at the market effects and also short-term effects and long-term effects. So just to dig a little bit deeper into the main differences between ALCA and CLCA before going into the case study or the example that I've brought in this presentation, is of course that ALCA is more, if you look at the goal scope, it's more descriptive, where the CLCA is the consequences of a change in demand. For example, you demanding more canned of tomatoes, what will then happen? What kind of system will then react to this change? Of course, the data in an attributional life cycle assessment will be average mixes or average data, where you will, in the CLCA, it will be based on marginal suppliers. So those that are actually able to react to a change because they are also not constrained. So the reference flow of an ALCA will be produced by scaling the existing average markets and suppliers, where in the CLCA, it will be produced by scaling the most likely suppliers to be affected by a change in demand. Now, just for the handling of multifunctional processes, typically when we conduct an LCA on a product, we'll run into processes where we have multiple functions. So you will have one, for example, input into a process, but we will have multiple outputs. And in these cases, we will need to assign the emission some way. And ALCA will typically recommend to do what we call allocation. So allocate the emission that happened upstream to the outputs produced, the multiple outputs produced. You can do that by mass, economic, or some other physical property. And then you will have CLCA, which will recommend typically using substitution of system expansion, expanding the system and also including the avoided production. The time horizon, of course, is also different between an ALCA and CLCA, where ALCA will typically, attributional life cycle assessment will focus on the historical impacts over a product's entire life cycle, and CLCA will have different timescales, both short-term effects, but also long-term effects. So now I brought this example with me that actually kind of shows the differences between modeling meat from a dairy cow based on attributional life cycle assessment versus consequential life cycle assessment. And I brought dairy cow because dairy cow is actually a very interesting example, because in Denmark, a lot of the meat that we actually consume from our supermarkets and also a lot of places in Europe are based on these dairy cows. 83% of the herd in cattle herd composition in Denmark is based on dairy cows. And that also reflects what type of products that we are able to purchase in the supermarkets. So when a lot of products are from dairy cows. Of course, when we model the emissions of a dairy cow, we know that it also is a multifunctional system, because a dairy cow will produce a lot of milk, a huge quantity of milk. But when the milk supply kind of decreases after 3 to 4 years, then the cow is then slaughtered, and we consume then the byproducts, which is the meat part. So how do we handle this when we do a classical attributional LCA model, or take an LCA modeling approach? Typically, what we will do is use some sort of allocation. And in many cases, we use what they call biophysical allocation. These are the typical equations that you will use in order to allocate the emission to the milk and to the live animal, to the meat. You can say this, then you will get the emission, of course, from the dairy cow on the milk part and then the meat part. But however, if you want to do it in a consequential modeling approach, then this will actually be very much different, because a milking cow is not part of a consequential life cycle assessment. What I mean about that is, if we say that the demand for meat in Denmark is increasing, and we say in a consequential life cycle assessment, we will not include constrained products, because these are the products or suppliers that cannot react to a change. So increasing the demand for meat in Denmark, for example, and we increase it based on we want more meat from a dairy cow, then a huge milk producer like Arla will not put more dairy cows on their fields. What probably will happen is that we impact the marginal beef production in Europe. And if you go to Faustat, we see that a lot of the meat that we import to Denmark and to Europe is actually from Argentina and Brazil. So what actually is being modeled in a consequential life cycle assessment is the meats coming from a beef cattle in Brazil or Argentina. And as Lisbeth already showed, that there is a huge difference between the emissions of the live animal, if it's a dairy cow, it's a beef cattle from a South American country, but also this is reflected upon the impact of the meats. So just to conclude, results of an ALCA and CLCA consequential or attributional life cycle assessment can be very different in some cases. And this can also affect the results of the study. In some cases, these differences can be smaller, but we just saw an example where the difference can be very, very high. The meat from a dairy cow is around 10-11 kilos of CO2 equivalents, where the meat from a beef cattle is around 40 kilos of CO2 equivalents. So it's a huge difference between the results conducting it based on attributional or consequential life cycle assessment. The main differences between ALCA and CLCA relates to the substitution allocation, but also the inclusion of or exclusion of the constrained suppliers, of course. And then choosing the right modeling approach should ensure that your LCA is both relevant and actionable, and whether your target is operational improvements or shaping policy decisions. So as already mentioned in the start, choosing the modeling approach will be highly linked to the purpose of your LCA study. Yes.
Thank you, Selma. Very
Thank you.
interesting. Now we have about 3 minutes for extra questions or comments.
Yeah, so feel free to raise your voice or put a question in the chat. Yeah. Yeah, Bao, you can ask your question. Yeah.
This is Eero Puolanen. I'm asking about the edible organs, how they are included into these calculations. And
Yes.
other things.
Yes. So the edible offal Peter, that you're referring to, I guess that is where we do allocation in the slaughterhouse. the slaughterhouse stage. I actually did prepare some slides showcasing that as well, how we do that. Unfortunately, due to the time constraints, I was not able to present. But here is also kind of a difference in how we handle that based on if it's a consequential life cycle assessment or a attributional life cycle assessment. But typically what you will do with edible offals, also according to the PEF guidelines, the product environmental footprint guidelines, is that you use economic allocation. So you allocate the emission based on the price, and the price for some organs might be high, might be low. So depending on the price, if it's a high price, then a high environmental impact is also allocated to some organs. And for beef cattle or cattle in general, we do have some organs that actually has a high price per kilo product.
Thank you. Pierre Bell, did you have a question? Yes. You need to unmute, yeah.
Yes. Thank you for the good presentation, Selma. I had more or less the same question as Eero. What about the hides? They are quite valuable.
Yes, and the same goes for the hides as the edible offal. They are getting allocated based on their economic price. So we do have also some issues where I'm sitting here in Danish Crown, that we have a leather company that are receiving the raw hides and selling finished leather. So basically, when we are selling the leather to a high price, our leather is also being allocated a high emission. So it will seem like we are producing leather of a high impact compared to some of our competitors, but it's only because we can get a higher price for our raw hides. But allocated based on price, economic allocation.
We have a question more. Clara, Maria.
Hi, Selma. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. So I was wondering, in consequential LCA, how do you actually know what will be the consequences of changing doing a marginal change? So in your case, you discussed dairy cows in Denmark. How can you actually know that a change in this would lead to an import from Brazil?
So just in the case of this dairy cow example that I brought as an example for this presentation, is that because dairy cows are a constrained supplier, the primary product is the milk, and the co-product, the secondary product, so to say, will be the meat. Then because they are constrained, or the meat product are constrained, then they cannot react to a change. So it will depend on if the product is a primal product, a reference product, or if it's only a co-product or a byproduct of a production system, for example.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Should we just take the last question here from Olivier and then continue afterwards? Yeah.
Okay.
Just a curiosity question about the stability or the changes when there are big changes in society, like with COVID and Ukraine. I was saying how much the selection of the marginal process for meat production or for the background electricity production have changed with such big change, and how this has affected or changed the results of consequential LCA.
No doubt that the big changes in the world will also lead to changes in the marginal suppliers. So you can say maybe, I don't know how, of course, that will change the results, because we did not do it specifically in this case. But of course, the validity, or you can say, of your consequential life cycle assessment model and the background data also needs to be updated when big changes happens in the world, because there's no doubt that marginal suppliers will also be affected by these changes. And that could also, as you, Olivia, said, that it will impact the results significantly in some cases.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to follow your lively discussion, but let's move on. Our next speaker is Annina Lehtilä from Luke. the presentation is about soil carbon and its inclusion to LCA. You will have your 10 minutes, Anniina, anyway, and then we'll see how the discussion part goes on. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and hopefully you can see the presentation mode now.
Yes, looks good.
Yes, that's perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anniina, and I'm a research scientist at LCA, and I've been working with soil carbon inclusion in LCA for a couple of years, and I'm going to present you in this presentation some definitions and introduction to the topic, and then some of our current work at LCA related to the topic and some future suggestions as well. Firstly, the consideration of land use and land use change in LCA is so that it's caused by land use changes or land management changes, usually in attributional LCA. So land use change, as mentioned already before, it's something change from one land use category to another, for example, clearing forest to cropland. And management change is something that happens on the same land use, but it's just change in a management, for example, start of cover cropping on agricultural land, etc. And soil is one really major part of the carbon stocks considered under LULUC in LCA. So it's including both mineral soils and also organic soils, meaning peat soils. And peat soils are especially important in Northern European conditions where we have lots of them, especially in Finland, where I'm from. And if we take a closer look at soil carbon in LCA, there's a typo in the title, but don't mind about that. So it's soil carbon in LCA. And if we take a look at the first one on the left side, so if the carbon input to the soil and the emissions of carbons due to carbon decomposition are equal, then there is zero impact. So that's then GWP zero, basically. And that is often caused if there has not been any land use changes or land management changes recently. But if there has been land use or management change, then there is either net emissions or net carbon sequestration on the field. So if the carbon input is lower than the emissions, then the GWP is increased because of net emissions. And on the upper side, then there might be also net carbon sequestration if the carbon input is higher. And here we have to acknowledge that the impact of LUC or LMC are not infinite, but their impact in product GWP is allocated usually throughout a specific period of time after the change in land use or management. Usually that is 20 years, according to PAS 2050, which is also applied in PEF, etc. So, and basically, if there has been a change, then there is a change in soil carbon, which should be included in LCA. But that is something that has not always been practiced because of the varying methodologies and data gaps, etc. And we've been working with two kinds of methodologies in this topic at LULUC. And these both are generally for agricultural LULUC emissions, and they're both including soil carbon stock changes. And first, I'm going to show you our national level approach. So this is for cases when LCA is applied aiming at consumer communication, so public communicating about the product for carbon footprint, for example, in food packages, etc. And we've been working in LCA footprint project at LULUC with a national guidance, which is based on PEF, but it's specified for Finland. And this LULUC methodology is a part of this guidance that we are going to publish actually this week. And our LULUC method is based on PEF, but we have made some adaptations. We are linking LCA regarding LULUC with national greenhouse gas inventory results to provide open access data, which is also annually updating. So that is improving the practicality of LCA calculations based on original PEF. We are considering only direct land use changes, just like in PEF, and no carbon sequestration in the soil because of the varying and lacking methodologies. So that is excluded. And our method is in principle for Finland, but it can be applied for any other countries as well. But we're focusing on Finland and providing a bit more extra values, etc., for Finnish products. And there are three options in our method. So firstly, the number one option is the calculation based on primary data from the production chain, which is the most optimal case. But since this data might not always be available, we have a second option, which is a regional default LULUC emissions for Finland, which we have provided if the origin can be traced to regional level. And if it cannot be traced to regional level, we have also country level default emissions for Finland, and the way how to do that also for other countries as well. And we're going to publish this guidance this week, as just mentioned. And here I show you some example calculations where we have been following this guidance, which we have produced. So here is a GVP of oats from cradle to farm gate per kg of oats. And we have included the GVP LULUC with the green color. So you can see that in Finland average level, where we have considered the average amount of organic soils in the production chain, which is 11%, and average amount of land use changes in the past 20 years. So with this average data, we have accounted for double GVP per kg of oats. So the emissions of LULUC are quite crucial. And especially when we did a sensitivity analysis where we compared oats cultivated fully on mineral soils with oats cultivated fully on organic soils, there was a 12 times difference between the GVPs of oats. So we see here that the results are very dependent on the share of organic soils within the production chain. And this is, of course, an issue in some specific areas where there is a lot of organic soils, like Finland, specifically the northern regions of Finland. But it's not only the issue on those regions, but also on those where there is even small percentages, some percentages of organic soils. It's also creating emissions which have not been always covered in the past LCAs. And then here is this other methodology that we are working on, which is a field level methodology. That's how we call it. So it is for a bit different kind of use than the national level methodology. So it is to monitor carbon footprints for farms or companies, etc. So it is not aimed for consumer communications in product labels, etc., but rather like in the internal development of companies or farms. And this method that we've been working on is a management specific one. So it's not only considering the impact of land use change, but also the land management changes, specifically for Finland. And it's been also specified in terms of Finnish climate and soil characteristics. And it has a possibility to account for carbon sequestration in mineral soils. LCA is a lot conflicting. In past 2050, it's stated that it should not be included in LCA results. In PEF, it's stated that it can be, but only as additional information, but basically it should not be. It should be only as additional information and not highlighted too much in the results. And following ISO standard 67, it said that it should be included if the permanence can be addressed. So the permanence of carbon sequestration is an issue, which we are also been trying to tackle somehow, how to validate the permanence of soil, carbon in the soil. So we say that carbon sequestration could be included in LCA results with carefulness. And here is an illustration of our methodology. So we have built a framework, and currently we have been applying the framework for this current scope that I show here. So for cereals and perennial grasses in Finland on mineral soils. And we have total 4 different land management chains categories included in the assessment so far. So different crop rotations, including either annual or perennial crops or both. And then we have cover cropping for cereals, straw retention for cereals, as well as manure applications for cereals and perennial crops. And to create these estimates of LMC impacts on soil carbon, we have been doing interdisciplinary research with the soil carbon modelers. We have 3 different soil carbon models, which we've been applying as a multi-model approach. So we are synthesizing the results of different models to reduce uncertainties. And then we are creating a simplified LCA method for further use by LCA practitioners. And here, finally, I show you some preliminary results of the carbon sequestration potential of 2 land management changes in barley grain production. So both cover cropping and manure application. So going from no cover cropping or no manure application to practicing them every year. So potentially there is a chance for carbon sequestration, but it's much depending on the continuation of the practices in long term and also on the methodological choices used in the modeling. But if there is an organic soil or soils in the barley production chain, then the impacts of potential carbon sequestration is reduced, basically diluted by the emissions in organic soils. So it's also both important to consider carbon sequestration, but also the organic soils if they are present in the area where the assessment is done. And just some conclusions. So crucial to distinguish mineral and organic soils, not only in Northern Europe, but also elsewhere. And we need a harmonized LCA method for soil carbon sequestration, because there has been a lot of push towards that from the food sector side. And to do that, we need more interdisciplinary and international cooperation also in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anniina, for very interesting presentation. Now it's time for questions and comments.
Yeah, we have a question here from Alberto.
Hi, Anniina. Thanks a lot for the very nice presentation. I think it was super clear. I got a bit curious about the method that you're going to be publishing, but today or these days, about the direct land use change and then the connection with the National Inventory Report. I think it's very helpful and useful going that way, and maybe it would be also more used by others. I'm just wondering a bit whether you have looked at different countries and how does it look, the National Inventory Report there? Because to my experience, they have, even though there are some general guidelines on that, the reality is that the level of granularity and the accuracy and the way that things are written, it varies a lot across different countries. So it might work very well for Finland and maybe even like from Denmark. It might not work for, I don't know, whatever other country. So have you tried to test that a bit? And then like a follow-up question, it is more about the, when you presented also these direct land use changes that you can have still based on the National Inventory Report, that you can have like a national one, average, and then you can have like also the one like a regional one, a regional scale. To this regional scale, are they still based on the same principle, contracting crops, expanding crops, where you will allocate more to expanding crops and less and not allocate to contracting crops, or it's just a flat allocation to all crops, basically there per hectare, so to say?
Thank you very much. So for the first question, we have not done any calculations comparing the different inventory results from different countries, but we are knowing that the reports have the same standard format where they are publishing the results in Excel file. So we have a procedure how to pick the right values from the Excel files from each country. So it's making it a bit easier, even though the reports might be in a bit different formats for the different countries. And for the other questions, for the regional perspective, we are having the same allocation of the land use change for different crops because they are quite often in rotations with each other in Finland. So we ended up having the same and not having the same kind of approach as in EcoInvent. So this expanding area approach. So we have a bit different.
So does that mean like it's a flat per hectare? So every hectare will get the same direct land use change?
Basically, yes, for the regional one, but if it's a calculation done with the primary data, then it's based on the primary data of the plots. Yeah.
Thank you.
So maybe, Anniina, a question, and I'm not at all an expert in this field, but of course with the meat production on pasture. We talk very much on pasture and permanent grassing. So can you reflect a little bit on that versus if you have crops that you rotate?
Yeah, at least if there is a shift from arable cropland to this grassland that is permanent, then there is a major carbon sequestration potential. But if it has already been a long time as a permanent grassland, then it's close to zero if there is no like further land management changes in the grassland.
I thought I interpreted your results like that, so it's nice to hear. Any more questions for Anina at this time anyway? That doesn't seem like it, so I guess Lisa, you can introduce the next speaker.
All right, thank you. So our next speaker is the Anni Havemuen, and she has provided me the recorded presentation. So I will switch off my camera and run the presentation. And after the presentation, you are welcome to give the questions and comments like for the previous presentations. We have experts here doing their best answering your questions.
Hello everybody, my name is Annie and I'm working as a vet in Animalia. I will now give you a brief introduction to the Norwegian animal welfare programs and how they are implemented in Norwegian animal husbandry. Animalia has coordinated the development of the animal welfare programs and operates them on behalf of the different stakeholders in Norway. So there has been an increased awareness towards animals' welfare and quality of life, leading to changes in how we define animal welfare, as well as affecting our handling of animals and what we offer animals in our care. Even though the animal health and welfare in Norway is generally seen to be very good, we know that there's a great variation among producers in what they offer their animals. Also, animal welfare has been focused in several documentaries, and animal welfare is concerning the consumers. The livestock industry therefore saw the need for generic animal welfare programs for both poultry, swine, cattle, and sheep, and have agreed on common guidelines and protocols to further assure that the milk and the meat originates from animals with acceptable animal welfare. All Norwegian animal welfare programs are launched and fully implemented except for sheep, which was launched last year and have still ongoing enrollment of herds. The animal welfare programs for production animals in Norway are all adjusted to species. However, all of them are based on veterinary visits, documentations, and measures to improve animal welfare. So, what is the purpose for the programs? It's no longer enough to say that we have strict regulations for keeping of animals. We must document that the regulations are complied with and provide the opportunity to be seen in the cards, make statistics available on key welfare areas in the barn, and show that we take deviations very seriously. These are key elements in the relationship of trust between the industry and society. The aim of the AVPs is to maintain and improve animal welfare in Norwegian herds by veterinarians reviewing the herds, together with the farmer, and if seen as necessary, initiating improvement measures according to a common protocol with a set of welfare indicators. In addition, there's a common aim to assure consumers that they can rely on that dairy and meat products with great probability come from animals that have had an acceptable quality of life. Hopefully, this way of facilitating the producer and veterinary cooperation will also benefit the producer by creating more income. So, almost all herds are required to perform an AVP veterinary visit, which a practicing veterinarian cooperates with the farmer by evaluating different animal welfare indicators in the herd. In order to be able to say something about the degree of welfare, we must use various welfare indicators. These are objective methods that say something about how an animal manages its life. Some indicators are resource-based and they relate to the environment and resources the animals have access to, such as stocking density, rooting materials for pigs, and quality of bedding. Resource-based welfare indicators are relatively easy to measure, record, and access. We also use animal-based welfare indicators. They are about conditions in the animal itself that can show whether it has a good life. Examples can be occurrence of disease, body conditioning score, or different behavioral expressions. An animal that is doing well often has a broad behavioral register, seems quick, and expresses positive behavior in various ways. So all the indicators are scored from 1 to 3, where score 1 means that the conditions are satisfactory. Score 2 indicates a need for improvement, and score 3 states that the conditions are not acceptable according to the AVP protocols. The score 3 involves obligatory actions and measures must be taken to avoid economic sanctions. The AVP veterinarian closes the discrepancy score 3 when following up is documented by the farmer. Score 2 involves suggested measures which are voluntary but recommended to follow up. The economic sanctions are implemented when either the visit is not performed or score 3 is not followed up 15 days after the deadline set for the visit or the deadline set by the veterinarian for following up a score 3. 45 days after the deadlines, the payment is further reduced to a total of 40% reduction in the meat price and 10% reduction in the milk price. To become an AVP veterinarian in Norway, the veterinarian they are required to perform a digital course consisting of 3 parts, including the aim and the overall frames of the AVP, the veterinarian role and impartiality, ethics, confidentiality, communication, and more specifically the visit itself and the welfare indicators. Apart from the obligatory course, any veterinarian, except those who are employed by the dairy and slaughterhouses can perform the visit. However, in most cases, the herd regular veterinarian will be the one performing the visit. A comprehensive and detailed manual assists and calibrates the veterinarian assessments. So in my last slide for you, I will say a few words about incorporating animal welfare into LCAs, because that is a growing area of interests. And some key points, I think, is that LCAs can be used to evaluate the impact of different animal welfare practices on the overall environmental footprint of meat production. This includes assessing the effects of improving living conditions, better feed, and human handling practices. And researchers are working on integrating animal welfare indicators into the LCA models. These indicators can include measure of animal health, behavior, and physiological stress, indicators that I have told you about in our ABPs. So, a holistic LCA approach considers both environmental and welfare impacts, aiming to find a balance that promotes sustainability and animal well-being. This approach helps in making informed decisions that benefit both environment and the animal. So that was all I have for now. So thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Right. That was Annie. Thank you. Thanks, Annie. And then we have the questions and comments.
Yeah, Mogens, you have a question?
Is it being discussed in Norway how big a percentage these animal welfare indicators could contribute with to an LCA?
Do we have some of the Norwegians who have a knowledge about that? Rune or Per, are you aware of any of the discussion?
Not that I'm aware of, so I've not heard that it's included, but I don't know, so I'm not the right one to answer it.
You could say the question is if it can completely overrule. I mean, these penalties that will be imposed in Norway for milk and meat prices, they seem to be very dramatic in the sense that then these factors will, with the payment, will really close down that production if they do not fix the thing. So why then include it in the LCA could be a question.
As I said, I'm not aware of it, but I agree that it's a high penalty to the producer is if they don't follow the regulations or the ethical standard. So I think it will have an effect, but I'm not aware if it's planned to include it. So someone else has to answer that.
And maybe Matthias, you know something?
Yes, I'm working with LCA in Norway, working for Nibio and mainly for ruminants, and I've until yet not included welfare. But I think this could be an important discussion that was mentioned before, that beef can be imported from Chile, from Brazil, Argentina, to compare the production in other countries with production in European countries. To show the consumers, there are many consumers aware about both climate and animal welfare. And inclusion of this additional impact factor would show the consumers, is it just cheap meat because it's a good production, or is it cheap meat because the animal welfare is bad in the production? So I think it can work. I have not seen it before, but I know that there are many people working on also including different other impact factors. But it's getting more difficult. So getting more impact factors is getting more difficult for us, for the consumers to take choices.
Euro, you have an input?
I have a comment more on the systematic level than on farm level. But my experience is that animal breeding is a major factor in animal welfare, and it is in dairy and in meat and in egg production. It's in all areas very important. So this is only a comment. I don't know how this can be included for this life cycle system, but it is of importance.
Yes, thank you. I agree that for sure the genotypes will impact many of the welfare traits. I agree on that, and could possibly be included as well. Yeah. More comments or questions? Otherwise, we can bring it up again a little bit later. But I guess we can continue then, Lisa, with the last presentation.
Yes, thank you. And our last presentation is about the trajectories towards sustainable and healthy food systems by Olivier Joliet. So Olivier, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Do you see my screen?
Yes, but not in presentation mode.
Okay, it's of course giving the presentation mode on the other screen. 1 second.
Yeah.
Let me share the other screen. That's as simple as that. Here and sorry about that.
No problem.
Stop sharing and share. And I share. Okay, do you see it?
Yes, now it's good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So I will relate it to MIC, LCA, and health evaluation of meat, including the use stage, which is interesting, and then we'll move towards a healthy and absolute sustainable food system here. So about improving our production, what we can and we cannot do, also in terms of the assessment, and I propose a combined quantification of health and sustainability for all product, but meat product in particular, where to start from to improve our system and where we need to go, how good is good enough for our protein production system. It was interesting. In fact, it's in conversation with the dairy industry in the US when I was at University of Michigan until 2 years ago, where I moved here at DTU. But we were put with Victor Fulgoni, a nutritionist in the US who had developed the NRF index, and really we do the classical LCA. I mean, with a different impact category, having human health, especially from ammonia emission. And then we have been neglecting, we've been a bit stupid in LCA because we've been discarding the use phase, which we pretend to have all that. And we need to look at the nutrition side, which also arrives to DALI. That's on the user, but there is not really, when we go by functional unit, which are really equivalent in terms of the health impact. It's rare to have that. So we should include the nutrition side. And that's a framework we published in 2016 and then applied later. For the environmental impact, I started LCA in agriculture in 1992. It's nice to see the amount of data available. I mean, you, Lisbeth and Margaret, you are showing this detailed data with different type of LCA. and how it has progressed with all this data. I'll be interested just for Denmark and the Nordic country to discuss with you how we arrive to a sort of consensus data set would be really interesting. Now on the nutrition side, we are arriving to DALI impact, I say, on the environmental side. We would also like to arrive, and the GBD, the global burden of disease, is in fact offering 16 dietary risk factors, which basically arrive to DALIs, the disability adjusted life years, or years of life lost, but also have the years of life disabled, living with a disability. In a sense, it's parallel to having the welfare of the animal. I mean, it's also the quality of life during these years. And per gram of processed meat or per gram of legumes, this is a detrimental effect. This is a beneficial effect in that case. And we have all these risk factors, which are here, have been identified. We get risk ratio. We combine that with the background rate here, and we have it in detail for 15 health outcome, 15 age group. We're arriving to sort of 6,000 DRF, but when we arrive, we can re-aggregate them and arrive to 16 dietary risk factor, and we have that for every country now. This is new that we just coming that in the GLAM project from the United Nations. When we do that, we arrive to these DRF, which are here on log scale in these arrows. Well, I just take here the processed meat. If we look at meat or the red meat, we see that ischemic heart disease is affected mostly through years of life lost, and diabetes is the other that meat is playing an important role. And here it's not only years of life loss, but years living with disability, which is important. The latest results from red meat, this was our 2016 publication in Nature Food, but another red meat in GBD also includes ischemic heart disease, and it has increased, in fact, nearly to the level of processed meat in terms of detrimental effect. How does it work? I take the health nutrient, we define a health nutrition index, which is in the inverse of DALI, that will be a positive or minus DALI. In that case, for a beef hot dog on a bun, we decompose into this risk factor from the GBD. So how much processed meat? We have 61 processed meat, that's a sausage. We have 1 gram of fiber, 1 gram of sodium, 2 gram of PUFA, some calcium, and trans fat. And we will multiply that by the characterization factor, which are this dietary risk factor where we have aggregated in, and the processed meat, we have 0.86 DALI per gram processed meat. We don't have micro DALI. So it's 1 per million of years of life lost, in fact. And to have it a bit more intuitive for people, we've translated that in how many minutes we have in a year. We have, in fact, 500,000 minutes. So a micro DALI is, in fact, 0.5 minute lost. Okay, so if we multiply 61 by 0.86, 0.52, we arrive to 27 minute loss, 27 minute loss, yes, per serving here. This is due to the red meat. We have another here, 7 minutes loss due to the gram of sodium, 3 minutes loss with the PUFA, that's 37 minute loss, and 1 minute gain through the calcium PUFA and fibers from the bun in that case. And so as a whole, we arrive 1 hot dog, 36 minutes of life lost. And we can do that for now 5,000 food items. When we published that and the hot dog, it became viral. We had 120,000 likes on CNN in one night or 2 nights, 2 days, and had a potential reach of 1.3 billion people on this publication, or especially the hot dog story here. But this is available at this address. You can get it free here on the small targeted things. So when we're looking, we were comparing now. Here you have the minus Henny, so it's a minutes gain here, and the minutes lost on this side. Okay, so we want to be to the left, and here we have the global warming scores that we have here. And we've positioned different food items on this here, 160 mostly used food item in the US. When we were looking, the beef is up there. We're not surprised. We know that if it's dairy beef, we are also at a quarter, about or a third of what we have. Pork and lamb are here. Then the processed meat, depending how we allocate, has a relatively low impact. In that case, my hot dog is here, so detrimental, but not so much. Now, if we take the new, in fact, GBD factor, including the ischemic heart disease of red meat, we will move these points on this side. So just to say shortly, if we were saying a scenario where we would remove the processed meat and the beef from the diet of Americans here, that would be 10% of the calories. And with this 10%, we see the poultry, dairy here, the seafood here, and the fruit, vegetable, whole grain, which have here a positive impact in that case here. So if we now remove this dark red beef and processed meat for a mixture of that, we see we have 10% caloric that corresponds to 10% of caloric replacement, and we are gaining about 48 minutes of healthy life per person per day, and a relative reduction of carbon footprint of 33% here. We look at the 18 other impact categories, similar trend except water. Water behaves differently. We had only 6% benefit with the water. We need other optimization for the water than that. Now, if we say what would be good enough, is this 30% reduction for global warming sufficient? If we say we would like to have a reduction compatible with the 1.5 degree, our target per person year would be about 300 to 1,000 kilo if we take different way to the share we could allow per capita. In Denmark, we are between now 8,000 or 10,000 kilo CO2 per capita. So it's a reduction factor from a factor 8 to 23. So we don't need a factor 30%. We need factor which are in the order of a factor 10 divided by 10. So 90% reduction in that case. And when we look where the target is with different protein, I mean, kilo protein, that's a colleague, that's not my own results. We see that the reduction should be substantial. Even favabine was not necessarily reaching that level. And so we need not only change in diet, but not only that, but we need the electrification of the production, reduction of N2O, and of course methane emission are needed here. So could we reach that? We were looking here, that's a collaboration with people at Leiden University. We were reduction in carbon footprint. Interestingly, we had health benefit also when we were reducing the food consumption, the meat consumption mostly here, and we could have a co-benefit in the healthy. Just as an optimal study, we nearly accepted in Nature Food. We just have some editors change to do, this is the present here US diet. So we would be a bit better in Europe, but not much. Again, here the minutes of life gained here, and the carbon footprint on the Y screen. So we would like to be, in fact, in this triangle here. We have some optimal diet which could do that, but we had other diet which were also close to that, and it's really important that we optimize both the health and the climate change, because we could have diet who are good in one thing but not necessarily good in the other. When we look what is available, we can have a bit of meat, especially white meat, processed meat in this optimal diet, some dairy, but really at low doses compared to the plant protein and here. So if I conclude, we need to reduce a lot. Healthy and sustainable can be aligned, but not necessarily. We should be careful, and possible to reach some healthy and sustainable diet, but all efforts are needed. And also an alignment of the subsidies should. We are not subsidizing for healthy diet presently, nor for sustainable diet. So we need here a strong reduction in meat, but some place for it if it's improved. Okay, I think I have more detail, but I will say that the work and the earlier work here is paid by the U.S. Dairy Research Institute, which wanted to compare dairy to the anti-diet, which was interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier, for a very interesting presentation. Now we have a few minutes special questions or comments to Olivier.
Yes, I can say that following our workshop on LCA of meat, we were exactly discussing this. How do we bring in the nutritional value of different food items? So that's what you have demonstrated here. That's really interesting to start looking into that as well. So I can start with a question, maybe because you said here the processed food or the processed meat is actually better than the red meat in your tables or figures there, and I wonder, is that because the processed meat has a lower value, and that's then means that when you allocate it in ULCA, it has a lower impact? Or
that's correct. That's the reason here, and depending on the allocation, we could discuss where exactly it goes. Here, the beef cattle, which is here in the US, is considered from cattle, not from dairy beef, as I say, which would be down here in that case. Well, what I think important, just one comment on using the nutrition impacts, that we don't only look at the nutrients, but the tendency in epidemiology has been to move to food groups. So we have here a combination now in the GBD between food groups and nutrient, and I think we need both when we consider the impact. And interesting, we can arrive to DALYs or micro DALYs. We do that for the environmental impact, no reason not to do it here. And we could complement it with, like, B12 is not considered here. We could complement it with some perhaps complemented value here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Rons, you have a question?
These results that you told about, recent ones about how beef could be even worse, going to the right in the figure on the presentation now, is that based on US data from, or is it based on European data? Because I know from previous big reviews and meta-analysis that there's quite some differences between what is found in European data and US data, maybe due to the level of frying, barbecuing, whatsoever in the US market that gives what's worse value compared to how we eat the meat in other parts of the world.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I'm not an epidemiologist myself. I'm a physicist, and I disclose everything. So I'm not a physician. So we have stick to what the GBD was doing. So normally the GBD should do it at world level and not consider a single country or region. And I have not looked at the latest data they have on the red meat. What has changed between 2000 here it's the GBD 2016 and in the GBD 2019 they have introduced a risk of red meat on ischemic heart disease, which make it higher here. That's the main reason for it being higher. I don't think they have differentiated their risk ratio between region of the world. So they have a single one, to my knowledge, and so we'll apply the same micro DALY per gram. We'll arrive at the same between region. What we are the difference between region will be linked to the background rates, which are about half in US. Half in Europe compared to US. So Regionalization is basically linked to the background rate of ischemic heart disease or diabetes, which is much lower in Europe. So that's accounting that a factor 2. But not on the per gram. No, but that's correct. The per gram will be a factor 2 lower due to the background rate, but the risk ratio are the same. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
More comments in general to also all the other presentations, please go ahead, and if you have inputs. Gustav, you had an input here earlier on where you wrote that when we do this, I always forgot it, consequential allocation, I guess. It doesn't take into account that we have a pool of calves in Europe that would be the first one to be used. Maybe you want to fold that out a little bit. If you are around,
I don't think that Gustav is present, Margrethe.
Anymore.
He ran into a different meeting. So.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will leave that. So any inputs to your presentations?
Yeah, just one. I think this last one is very, very interesting to get this perspective on the whole picture. I like that very much. I'll dig more into that myself. I think that is very important. But it's like also going to these data from Finland about if you use regional or the specific field for that farm, or you use national or European or whatsoever. I think we have to be very keen on what we're choosing, also in relation to what I just asked Olivier about, because you can. Do you want to do something to promote your own, or is it to the benefit of the world, or so? That is also very much involved in this, how we do the LUC type of thing. Is it for us, or is it for them, or is it for the whole world, or are my animals producing better than yours on an LCA basis? So yeah, just a comment.
Yeah, that's Selma. When we had our earlier workshop there, you sort of described those two methods that you presented here, the A or the C LCA, and I think you explained quite well. When do you use the one or the other in the company of Danish Crown? Maybe you could
yes.
say a few words on that.
Yes, of course. So, of course, if our supplier is requiring for us to use a certain framework or a certain guideline, it could be PEF, that they require us to follow the PEF guidelines, then of course we will always follow those guidelines. You can say that we just saw the example of the dairy cow, and you can say that a lot of animals that we slaughter in Danish Crown are dairy cows. So the meat that we produce are from this animal species that has a lower environmental impact due to the allocation of the emission to the milk and the meat part. Then when we do, for example, corporate sustainability reporting, such as in line with the CSRD requirements and Scope 3 emissions, also in connection to the Science-Based Target Initiative, then it does not make sense for us to report based on a consequential life cycle assessment where it's where the dairy cow does not actually exist because it's a constrained system. Then we will report that our meat is from South American meat or beef cattle. So in that sense, for us as Danish Crown, that doesn't make sense. We will always account that as and use the results from our attributional life cycle assessment model. Also, I want to mention in product or in development, we use a lot of resources to collect primary data from our farmers and also make initiatives at the farm in order to reduce the emissions from the dairy cows. You can say if we only use the CLCA modeling approach, then we will, of course, as already mentioned, model the South American beef cattle system, and it will undermine all the efforts that we do in order to collect the primary data from the dairy farmers, as well as the initiatives that and it could be huge investment projects as well that we initiate with the farmers. We can actually not monitor the effect of those. So in those senses, it will not make sense, or in those regards, it will not make sense to use, in my opinion, a consequential modeling approach. But if it was more strategic decisions, more political decisions, if we are supposed to eat more meats in Denmark, and from which types of animals, and what can we expect also of indirect emissions, then I will see that I can definitely see that the consequential life cycle assessment can be more appropriate when we have to use it for decision support. Yes, so that was just how I see it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Also, we heard about the animal welfare inclusion in a possible relationship with the LCA, but Lisbeth, you have also looked a little bit into, for example, including biodiversity and of course also some of the other issues like water, land use in general, and water occupation. Do you have a few comments on that? Lisbeth, did you?
Sorry. Yeah, about you can say it's a little bit the same, the problematic with including animal welfare and biodiversity, that it's not, there's a lot of questions coming to animal welfare that we don't have when we look at more environmental issues, because there you can say we calculate the emission, but animal welfare, it's only this simple to compare different livestock. What is an optimal life for cattle versus pig versus pork? And how do we take into account that we need to sum up a whole life? Like when we make LCA of a whole product, we take the whole chain, and then we have, how do we count a small period where it's critical, for example, transport to slaughter? How do we take that into account compared to a whole life? And there's a lot of difficulties to come to include the animal welfare into LCA, because I know, and yeah, and you can say about biodiversity, it's a little bit the same as with animal welfare. There's different definition of how do we look at biodiversity. Like we work with a method that look at the land for feed production, where someone looked only at the very rare plant species. So it's there's much debate going on still about the definition of these two topics.
Yes.
Just perhaps an input on this question. Just with the GLAM project, which is a global consensual method from the United Nations, the Life Cycle Initiative, which has been just published we were in Göteborg, in fact, in the Nordic region in November. There is now the impact assessment for ecosystem quality is accounting for endemic species and the vulnerability of species and there. So that, I mean, if you're interested to account for that, that could be an interesting input based on the global extinction probability of species. GP. Yeah. This work made also in the Nordic country in Trondheim by Francesca Verones and her team.
Yeah.
And our factor for the use phase are available on this on the life cycle initiative in this GLAM. If you look GLAM life cycle initiative, you would access the framework and the factors for each country in the world. But I'm ready to collaborate. If any of you is interested, we could have a small seminar how to work it, and I can provide you the data.
Thank you very much. Clara, you have a comment?
No, I'm sorry. That was a mistake.
Okay.
I'm really sorry. Yes.
Okay, no problem at all. Yeah. But yeah, I think for sure that's very nice that you offer this, Olivier. I think that's you covering an area that we didn't have in our network at this stage. So I think really interesting to expand also into the food products. Yeah. Well, Matthias, you have a...
Yes, I think it's one thing that I think most of the countries we have always rangeland, or we have a crop rotation that we need grass. And though we have ruminants which can utilize these areas to produce milk and meat, but we have high emissions due to the digestion. So it's one of the both possibilities and the things which are difficult to handle, but as well we have to work on how to reduce the emissions. But I think it was also, and then we get red meat. And I think that's really nice for me to see that Olivia was including both beef and processed meat. It's not processed beef, but I think it's important to see, is it just the red meat which is unhealthy to eat, or it's the processing today? I think it's also for agriculture important to discuss, is it just our product, or it's today processing of the food we produce, which is doing it more unhealthy for the consumers? It's not covered by LCA, but I think it's really important to broaden the discussion, not just to focus as a food products we buy today, but also maybe how it can be improved. And the use of sodium nitrate, it's to preserve the meat and to keep it more red. It's just the consumer. It's nice for us to buy it, but is this worth the price we pay for with our health?
I mean,
so
excellent comment. Just a comment. Putting a carcinogenic directly in our food chain, like nitrates, is really we should avoid that. But the question is also, in fact, with plant-based, when you process so much the plant-based that they look like meat, we don't have enough, I think, data, epidemiological data, or enough people eating that to see the effect. But it will be interesting to see if in that case, how they look compared to the processed meat, in fact. So processed veggie could be also problematic, I think. But nothing in the GBD about it yet.
Yeah. And I think it's really, your results really demonstrated that if we don't see the full picture, we can twist a lot because those products that are used for some of the processed meats are the low value products. So they will have a low LCA impact, and then we can actually, so it's a matter of also putting the right value on products.
Yeah. And then, for example, the process, like chicken, is not the white meat is not detrimental according to the GBD. Okay, so we don't have any risk factor, but if you have processed chicken, then they will be counted as processed meat.
Yes, yeah.
At least in what we have done.
For both way, yeah. Okay, Måns, last input maybe. You're muted, Måns.
Sorry. So maybe the way to go is to include these more different values to get a more holistic approach. So still keep the LCA as the LCA is, and do not make it difficult to try to add things into the LCA as such that cannot really be incorporated, like biodiversity loss and stuff like that, but that you need to make maybe not such a spider web, but something that is the LCA, something that is covering the animal welfare, something that covers something with the human health and so on, and something about the environment, which is not really covered in the LCA totally. And then try to find some weights to the different components of the total analysis of how to go and what to do with meat, for instance. Maybe it's more index-based total assessment.
Yeah. So broadening, give up the idea of just having one number, is because it will hide a lot of impacts that are important as well.
Weigh it together how we as humans see it is good for us, our health, our environment, our animal welfare, and so on. So that you say LCA is 40%, 20% to that, and so for different things, 40% for our health. Try to discuss these weights of the different components of the whole assessment.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, may I just comment about that?
Sure.
I fully agree that we should always present, and that's valid for the impact category in an LCA, separately first. Here, I think for the weighting, I think we should do first the science we can do, and if we have DALI from fine particulate and have a risk ratio for that, we have also risk ratio for nutrition, and we could use the same type of approach, and then the DALI can be added up. Then we could have a weighting between environmental quality, human health, and like resources. And in fact, the GLAM method is now proposing and has done a survey in different countries, proposing some weights for that, but they are not the way to use. You could use your own. But I really advocate we use the science as far as we can for what we can sum up, rather than giving a weight to acidification and eutrophication, for example. Do first impact on biodiversity, and then we need to wait as a structure.
Thank you very much, and I think the time is up, and I would like to thank you all for joining this webinar. I think actually I'm very happy about the outcome. It was a little bit of a tester, so I think we can maybe develop that for our next theme. But thank you very much also to all the speakers who have enlightened us on specific topics here on the LCA of meat. And yes, as mentioned, you will have access to the presentations on our webpage. So please look for NordMeat at AU, then you will find it. And otherwise, I wish you a nice rest of the day and also a nice Christmas when you get to that. Thank you.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Agnete, do you have 1 minute, or you wanted to
sure.
meet?
Yeah. No, yes.
Okay, we can do it. Nothing confidential.
No. Yeah.
So thanks for the invitation for joining. Are you together with Lisbeth or in the same group, or?
No, I'm sitting in the Department of Food Science. So I'm sitting actually in Skyby in Agro Food Park.
Okay.
Yeah, but I have used to be in Foulum previously. So yeah. So it's not. I'm not working with LCA, but I'm working with meat, you could say, in general.
Okay.
But I'm interested in meat in a matter of where it's in our diets, and also looking into the nutritional value and all those things. So I really your input was very relevant, I think, and I noted down some of the references to look into. Yeah.
You can have a look. I mean, we've progressed. We have not published yet our work from from the Life Cycle Initiative. We're working on it. That's my task for
Okay. Yeah, when you're done,
before December, that we get something, or at least a draft out for that. But if you like, now we have these country-specific factors, which are really nice. Instead of just the average. Now, I was trying to discuss, but perhaps it's with Lisbeth, I should discuss perhaps collaboration also on the LCA side.
I think she's working with that all the time, and I'm sure she will be interested in discussing the allocations and how you can develop it further.
Because we don't have really a sort of default set of processes that we could easily use for Denmark, if you like.
No, but I think Lisbeth is the one to reach out to, because she has also done. Yes, she's also doing this what you call the myndighedsberedskab on it. So she's quite well.
I will contact
settled on that one there.
How can we join your network? Can we? How
yes,
do you...
it's an open network for sure. So we it's sort of this NKDA. So we will have a workshop also next year, which will look more into the use of the carcass, so to put the value on. But and then some online meetings. But I can invite you for the coming, and then you can see.
Please. Perhaps my postdoc. I have a postdoc and a PhD student are finishing on that. I will give you perhaps their email. If you could invite them, it's just nice. Because I usually forget to invite them. So
no, but just send it to me, and then I'll make sure they get an invitation.
So because I wasn't sure if they could join or not today. So
no, but it's an open network, so everyone is welcome actually. So that's very good. Yes.
I'm not too optimistic on like beef. I think sustainable beef. I don't think it exists with cattle. I don't think.
No, and that's probably also just an outcome actually, that you just have to minimize your intake to a lower limit, and then you. It's I'm also we're working quite a lot also on cultivated meat. So in that sense, it's also here at my department I'm involved in. So so that's sort of another track or another way to get the meat.
That will be interesting if how good or how bad it's there, or how good we can make it.
So of course we haven't done it, but we sort of working on looking into the nutritional value, and that's what we want to do in order to also evaluate that as well. Yes.
Are you working on fish also, or you're not touching?
No, but we have some suggestions of doing it, but we haven't done it so far. No. Yes. But,
because I have presently some aquaculture project. Nothing in fact on meat directly, but apart from diet optimization, which
but whenever if you have something, then we work with meat here as well. There's not so many doing it here in Denmark actually anymore, so please reach out if you have anything.
Thank you very much. Very nice to meet you, and all the
same.
best. Thank you.
Bye.